into this session. Yeah, we are going to record it. Please feel free to change your names or feel how you need if you don't want to be recorded. But we would like this session to be accessible for those who cannot join us live. So we are live. That's great. First thing is done. I probably will just say in few words why we are doing it. Actually, I was inspired. I never planned to do any live sessions, but I was somehow inspired by Alex's topic, and this is the focus on IT people who are in leadership. It's really interesting, and as many of you know me, I am an organizational psychologist. So anything to do with how we make decisions about our professions, how we lead people, or how we are part of the team, what impacts the way we are, and how we can change and shift to better ourselves. This is all that interests me a lot. So I somehow thought it would be so cool to talk to Alex about how he sees IT people, because you, Alex, yourself, are you are an IT person who is coming from a career of long years, where probably you'll tell us more, but I assume that you began once like a tech guy and then took over a few managerial roles. And now you are in a position when you step back from that, but you're supporting IT leaders in this field. From my experience, just to give it another frame, is that as I work with different companies and different teams, I have an assumption myself, and my observation is that all kind of professions, people are not the same in these professions or in these fields, but they kind of have their mentality. So like, let's say I have a client that is a law company, legal company. So they have a specific mentality. And then when I work with people in IT, I see that they are different. They're specific in their own way. So what's your experience? What's your observation?
Well, for sure, there are certain kind of archetypes, I would say. And I guess it's hard to trace what's the cause and what's the reason. Like, do certain people go to tech because that's the way they are, or do they go there and the tech mold them into something else? I don't know. I'm guessing that a lot of well, at least some people explicitly told me, like, I was not that good with people. It was much easier for me with technological stuff, doing writing code, interacting with basically computer than a human being. So some people were telling me that explicitly. I'm guessing that some people doing this more or less indeliberately, but still that could be a reason. So yeah, I would assume that there are a lot of certain kind of biases, stereotypes, substantiated and not substantiated, and also, like I'm saying, certain kind of archetypes in this profession. Because like some people are good with tech stuff, and obviously that creates some kind of room for, let's say, communication or people skills, which is filled by other kind of archetypes of people who are less skilled technically, but much more skilled in terms of people skills, and they can glue the technical stuff together, the inter-team dynamics and that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's again my assumption, and I never worked in a tech profession. So, but from what I observe is that this type of work requires a lot of focus for longer hours, and you need to have specific kind of mindset to be able to sustain these longer hours. Yeah, so if maybe I'd be like needing a lot of social contacts, that's not exactly what is where I can fulfill that potential in the tech field. Or maybe I'm wrong, and of course, tech is so wide, and there could be many. We have somebody sharing screen.
No, that's some kind of glitch. I'm not sure what's happening.
Okay, it's good. No, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Ahsan, sorry. We're good. So yeah, like there must be some kind of basement on which you put on the choice of the career, right?
I don't know. I mean, ideally, yes, but like, how do usually people choose the career? Like, almost always it is by an accident, or let,
Mhm.
let, let's say sometimes people make a choice with some kind of information available for them in their teen years, but then after studying they decide like that's not the field I want to be in. Or sometimes
Mhm.
it could be that people spend 10, 20 years in certain career and then realize that not necessarily it. Like, I've
Yeah.
turned 40 recently, and like I have a lot of clients who are around the same age. And often we do have conversations like, what's next? What's next? Because kind of by kind of this proverbial midlife crisis, kind of around 40 people started asking like, what's my life is for? And then they try to connect
Mhm.
what they're able to do, what kind of skill set
Mhm.
they have, with the things that kind of coming from the inside, what they aspire, what their values are. Well, I have my own
Mhm.
version why it's not happening earlier, but usually that's not the kind of questions people are asking in their early 20s or in their teens, because they are looking more for success, for successful socialization, to be autonomous,
Right.
to be successful, and that type of stuff. So I'm guessing that's the parallel process, kind of choosing, but also building a foundation for what we're choosing. So kind of it's kind of a
Mhm.
intermingling between our soul searching and kind of what kind of information we can gather from the external world, from our colleagues,
Right.
from the market as well.
Right. Yeah. I was just wondering, for people who are listening here and who are live with us, what are you looking to hear about some maybe psychological perspective on the IT career? Or what is your general question or expectation that you would like us to cover today?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering what would be some typical skills, I suppose, in
Mm-hmm.
being a focused for somebody that has a lot of tech experience and they're now becoming a team leader or a junior manager of some sort. What specific skills would they need to focus on to help them to become a really good team leader or junior manager of a tech team?
Mm-hmm. That's good question, John. Thank you.
Yeah, and the remark or disclaimer is that knowing what the skills are doesn't mean that if people know what the skills are, they will be able to use them. So kind of there's a kind of it's abstract or amorphous distinction, but kind of knowing what I should be doing and being able to do it is a very different thing. So even when they know and even when they practice skills before coming into this role, it's going to be slightly different. With that, what I see often is the biggest challenge is a different type of thinking. More, so let's say in a technical role, when being a technical specialist, not necessarily writing code, whatever kind of job is, when the person is technical specialist and individual contributor, what is usually needed is more or less kind of you can delineate the cause and effect. So usually the tasks are more mechanical. For example, if you write the code, it's more or less deterministic and predictable. With human beings, it becomes very, very different. So there are no right solutions, no right answers, and all of them are probabilistic, and all of them kind of on a scale of different criteria. And this is very different to accept as a different type of mindset. So maybe it's not even the skill, but a different type of mindset where people are able to sit with uncertainty and sit with with the fact that there is no right way to do it. Every decision will probably have some kind of trade-off, and then it becomes more about managing the trade-offs. So this is slightly different thing that needs to happen in terms of shifting the mindset. Kind of now I operate with people, and people are not going to be as predictable as response of kind of code interpreter to the software code. That's one thing. Another thing is, of course, managing the emotions. So emotions kind of they everywhere, and when you interact with the computer, uh, it's not that crucial. Like computer is not going to hate you, it's not going to resist on some kind of emotional level, but when you're dealing with people, that stuff is going to happen. And emotion, like sometimes people have this kind of attitude or believe that emotions is something like almost clinical. Like probably even the word psychology in the title of this life is somehow can implicate some kind of something clinical or something related to psychotherapy, and
Right.
people for some reason they try to stay away from everything related to
My
emotions.
mic was
And
stolen, so it's really easy to do.
sorry, I'll mute you.
Can you please mute yourself
Yeah, yes.
on the call? Yeah.
So having emotional intelligence is very important, and like even the very basics, like understanding that people will have emotions not because something bad is happening, but that's the natural way for human organism to operate. And we need to understand that communication is going to happen on the different levels. So there's rational information, and there's going to be some emotional undercurrent behind it as well. So understanding my own emotions, understanding the emotions that people talk with, this is very important. And like the upside is that developing these kind of skills are not necessarily needed only in your job, but like they will be used in your personal relationships and whatever. So kind of becoming more skilled as a beginning manager, it will also help you to become a better human being, I would guess, or I would assert.
Yeah. I'll stop by the emotional intelligence and emotions as such, because I work with this topic in very, very different teams. And I always have this, kind of expectation that this is the topic that has been so much discussed, and we've like covered whatever possible. There are many books. You can go on YouTube and listen about emotional intelligence and so on, but somehow it's never enough when you talk to the to team, and you see that there still is a big opportunity and space to understand what emotions are and normalize that anger is just a part of life, and it informs us about something, right? Like any emotion informs us of certain, either someone or something is crossing our boundary, or we are crossing our own boundaries. So once we do it, emotion is informing us that we are there in the place where we are hurting ourselves. So or we are doing something good to ourselves. So right, emotional intelligence, it's probably specific not only to tech field, but we still all need it in a way.
Yeah. And like sometimes it's about like not being willing to deliver certain feedback because people are afraid to hurt someone, or they
Yeah.
may be afraid like, what if they will become frustrated and I don't know how to cope with that emotion? So sometimes people withhold a lot of information, which need to be shared with others, because otherwise, like, it's not possible to do it. And like one of related to Sean's question, like one of the pitfalls that is there for beginning managers, leaders, is that usually it's much easier for them to do something rather than to correct the behavior of people who report to them. So sometimes kind of instead of going and delivering some feedback, it's much easier to kind of roll up your sleeves and to go and do it on your own. And maybe sometimes it makes sense. But when this becomes a pattern of avoiding giving some difficult feedback, of shaping other people's behaviors, and instead correcting the gaps on your own, you will be just drawn.
So that's the place, if I understand correctly, that we can connect to micromanaging then?
Well, micromanagement is an interesting topic because it's, again, it is related to the stuff which is not mechanical and which is going to be kind of a gap in the mindset when people become, let's say, growing as managers, as a team leaders. Because like in doing technical and predictable work, it's easy always to get this precise and definitive feedback and information and see how the system works. It's not going to be like that when you work with people, because kind of even the fact that you are looking kind of over someone's shoulder or asking them for information, it distracts them. So kind of your presence in this system and your requiring for the information, it affects the system itself, unlike, let's say, working of the software code. So that's one thing. And another thing is about, it's super related to building trust and building relationship, because like the micromanagement, if there's micromanagement, there's also going to be some kind of control or trust issue. Because if you can trust someone to do their job, why would you micromanage? You will not do this. It's only because you cannot trust, and most likely you cannot trust because certain things already happened. And certain things are already happened, most likely probably because the first time it happened, it was not that big of an issue and you didn't say anything. So usually that's kind of the snowball that snowballs with time. And like it's easy to trace to these kind of things, like the question whether people are willing to do it or not, because already when the micromanagement happens, there is already certain kind of story, or they're lazy, they cannot be trusted, they are not responsible enough. But like a person as a leader is the one who cultivates the responsibility. And like it's much easier to say than to do, but like how one becomes a person who cultivates responsibility, it's not an easy task. And most of the people who are just making first steps as leaders, they're not equipped with the skills and mindsets in order to be able to do that. They're much more equipped with the mindset and skill set to engineer a solution. And like to engineer the solution, you track all the sources of information, which basically becomes micromanagement. So you become in the center of this process, and everything depends on you.
If you begin this process from the wrong place, as you said, the snowball then keeps on becoming bigger and bigger, and it's really not easy to get out of it. And but I really liked what you said about leader has a responsibility to cultivate or cultivate the responsibility, right? So it's like in my understanding, it's like I understand that my perspective on the story about these people, let's say they are lazy, and what I do with that story in my mind is my own responsibility. So there is a huge opportunity, right, to kind of realize your own biases and work with them in order not to step in on your own way in leadership.
I mean,
Trust.
like one thing I can add, like usually when something like this is happening, and when we explore it like in coaching conversation, usually it's like they tell this story and I ask them, and what's then? Like they didn't do something, and what's then? And usually what's then is that they didn't do, I blame them,
Right.
and I did something on my own. So kind of usually it's kind of what happens after I told this story, or kind of what happens after the perception. So I perceived something, I observed something, and what's then? Usually then what happens is that some kind of inaction happen. So some kind of action is not following. And like usually what's helpful, and people can do it on their own, is to kind of explore like, okay, so what do I do when I'm frustrated with someone coming later to a meeting 5 minutes? Well, I just passively aggressively tell them like how wrong they are. But that's not the most empowering place to be. Like when we observe something, like what other choices do we have?
Yeah, I really like this one. There is another interesting question in the chat, and I believe this question has a good place, and it's probably you don't see it, it came as a direct message,
Yep.
but it's about healthy work-life balance, because as you said, people working in IT, not only in IT, but many, or maybe most of us work these days with computers, where we don't interact with another person. So it's really hard to find a boundary, a healthy boundaries, and sometimes we get stuck. And managing work-life balance, or telling ourselves just another 10-15 minutes, just another, it is today, but it becomes a pattern that may stay with us for years. So what is your strategy, or strategy that you applied on your own, or you can advise from your experience, and that can help IT professionals to sustain work-life balance?
It's not an easy question for me, because I am probably not aligned with kind of what's mainstream thinking about it. And I think that kind of more or less mainstream answer would be to have strong and healthy boundaries. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know, have the
have
separation.
them.
Sometimes like the separation even like physical. Have different laptop, have different room or table where you do work, even wear different clothes if you work from home. But I think that's only part of the answer, because so it will become more philosophical. So like if needed, stop me, interrupt me. What I believe is that there is no such thing as work which is separate from who we are. And when we create this separation, it leads to burnout. Basically what it means that like we create some kind of persona that does the work, and something in us, I don't know, should be asleep or whatever during that time. And then work starts, we put this persona aside and we become real us, and there we live. I think this is a very dangerous way of living, because, and I'm not saying it's easier to do the opposite stuff, but I believe it leads to burnout, because burnout usually it's not about the amount of work, but about the disconnection, and about living from the place which is very far from where our values are. So I think kind of one way to focus on work-life balance is how to clearly delineate what is work, what are the activities we are paid for, and what are the activities that kind of other part of our lives. But I think another important aspect, like what are the activities that nourish us and that are aligned with who we are. Like how can we have fun? How can we make impact? How we can grow our mastery? How can we build better relationship, no matter whether this activity labeled as work, or I don't know, relax, or having time with our families. I think this is kind of not necessarily the answer to your question, But I think that's a way of thinking which can kind of complement this question about work-life balance.
I really like this view, and I never thought about it this way, but I agree with you that probably the opposite in this case to the burnout would be the state of flow, which the concept of flow, which Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is talking about.
Yeah.
When we are doing what we love, when we are truly authentically connected to ourselves, and from that place we do our work or choose what we want to do,
Yeah.
we get into the state of flow, which means that we even forget about some kind of basic needs, but not because we are under stress, but because we are so much enjoying it. And his idea is that without the spending time in this flow state, we are not able to be happy. So, of course, this is a discussion if it's true or not for everyone, but probably it's something what would be the opposite, because in the burnout, we also get into the state where we don't recognize our needs or we don't know of our needs anymore. But it's coming from the place of real stress and weakness more than of joy.
Yeah. I mean, what I often observe is, because kind of the common approach is, when I at work, I should be professional. So it's kind of like we need to numb down ourselves so that we are almost like robots. And of course, if we do that for 8-10 hours a day for a decade or two, then kind of it becomes hard to feel anything outside of work, because we're so accustomed to wearing a mask. So it becomes hard to realize where the mask ends and where real us kind of start. And this is like the very simple question, what do you want? It's often very difficult for people, because like usually the first layer, like more time, more money, but for what? And often, I mean, people know kind of the first answers, but if you dig deeper and start asking what for, a lot of people find themselves lost. It's like, we don't know what we want. And I think like the questions about being authentic at work, like even like one of the contributing factors to job engagement is having a friend at work. Like building relationships at work is
Right.
immensely important, because like we are social animals. It's super banal to say that, but we are social animals, and being with being like a real human being with other real human beings is also, from the standpoint of business, very useful, because then information can flow, then the real cooperation can start, because like we see people not as objects that just follow our commands, but we empower them to think on their own. And when people who report to us think like that they're only objects or cogs in the wheel that require to do certain things, well, they will behave accordingly. They will not take responsibility, for example.
Yeah, I think this authenticity topic is a very also philosophical topic, right? Because it's we would all like to be authentic and not carry masks, and we don't. Oftentimes, we don't do it consciously. We just wear them because they protect us in a certain way. But what is really hard once we realize I'm wearing mask is to understand how is it not to wear it, right? How is it to
Yeah.
take it off? What does it mean? And because it's such a vulnerable place to be, to come without mask into a team, and now what? Now
Yes.
how will I protect myself, right? So building or understanding the principle of boundaries and how to
Yes.
put the boundaries in ecological manner, that it's not hurting anyone, neither myself nor the other, is really important in order to be authentic. Okay, I'm myself, but I can also protect myself if I feel that my boundaries are crossed, and this is doesn't go without one, doesn't go without the other, right?
Yeah. I think like authenticity is always like, when you have conversation about authenticity, is often about the risks. So kind of usually the connotation around being authentic, it's dangerous, it's risky.
Yeah.
But another thing often related to that is like it's about being nasty. And usually it's only because like when we are, and like all things that I'm saying, they're also relevant for me as well, because I went through that. Like when we are not authentic, it means that we basically accumulate a lot of negative stuff in us. And we think like, if suddenly we become authentic, it means that we need to say mean things to people around us. Oops. Ola, are you tut?
No, I don't know.
Yep.
Somehow I lost you.
Yeah, I've lost you.
But I cannot turn on my video anymore.
That's weird. Let me give you a second.
Sorry, probably is something with my connection.
You should be able to turn it on now.
Should be back.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
I was saying that like people for some reason start to think that it's all about telling what you really think. And kind of because you were not telling it for a long time, kind of the connection telling what you really think means to tell mean things to people, kind of bad things. But it's not necessarily the case. And it's easy to start with like sometimes being much harder to be authentic about good stuff, like say people that you love them or you appreciate the job that they did. Like sometimes, especially for technical people, sometimes it's very hard to make a compliment. So it's not necessarily that authentic should be risky and difficult and related to these kind of angry outbursts. That's not necessarily the authenticity. And it can start from small places. Like, I know, telling a story about your childhood. Nothing risky about that at all. But it exposes kind of real you with connection to who you are as a human being. So kind of like a lot of this stuff, not necessarily related to authenticity, but a lot of stuff related to self-development, it's connected to perceived risks, to fear. And usually if people can spot that, the good place to start is to kind of like, what could be the safest action made in order to implement this? Like, what's the safest way to deliver this feedback? What's the safest way to ask for something that you want? And sometimes there are very safe kind of experiments that all of us can do, because like going and changing drastically, radically right away, it's difficult. And we don't know how the system will react. But if we make a small experiment, especially when not much is at stake, it's much easier to kind of see how we can start implement smaller changes, but then accumulate them with time, with something to become bigger.
Right. You know, it takes me to the place where I think about human contact as such, like what shapes us and the masks that we carry and the ability to be authentic at all is our experience, right, from our previous lives, from I mean, like not in esoteric meaning, but in from our childhood, from the years where we were young and maybe more vulnerable as teenagers. And in different contexts with different people, we shape our experience. And in psychotherapy, we say that it's what gets kind of damaged in relationships can only be built again in relationships. So the healing happens in the relationship where we get a new experience. And this, as you say, small steps are exactly the place where we can a little bit step out just half a step of our comfort zone and test if this can be different than I know it. And with time, we may expand our experience and see that, oh, something that we've been carrying with us for so many years doesn't have to be truth. It was just the perspective of me when I was much less protected, and I had to overstand something much bigger than I was. But it's not the reality that it is. So what I hear in the end is that there is a great potential for IT, but not probably only IT, but for many of us to learn and expand and grow, not just professionally, but also internally, like humans. I'll just read a question that we have. And I also saw the comment that came approximately when we talked about burnout and flow. There is a great TV show, Severance, about the topic. So it's highly recommended. And I'll look for it. And a question is, how do you think tech corporate versus product, small company, surrounding affect the mask or authenticity, affect the mask or authenticity? So it's either the corporate or small company, and they affect somehow the mask of authenticity. How do you deal with hierarchical rules, interns, with psychological safety?
Well, I would say that there might be differences, of course, and like startups are going to be very different than old corporations. But like it could be generalized about certain things, like there are probably much more dynamic and pressure and stress in startups, and it makes sense given their nature. At the same time, probably you can say that corporate is more bureaucratic, more faceless, and kind of sterile. We can argue that, but kind of what's important is that kind of the point that I make about small experiments, because we never know what this particular context or what this particular system will allow. And no matter what kind of industry it is, no matter what kind of scale of business or how big is the company, like a lot of will depend on like who one particular manager is or like where it is located. What I'm trying to say, like there is a possibility to do stuff to bring more authenticity. In terms of hierarchical rules, of course, a lot depends on the company and its culture. Startups as well, they care probably less about hierarchy and more about the product and delivering value to clients, especially early on. In terms of psychological safety, well, at least the stories about startups that probably it's harder there with psychological safety, but it's not necessarily inherent to the fact that that's the nature of startups, but it's more about like these people usually grow from being kind of hardcore technologists, and they need to build something quickly and something including teams, and they just don't know better. And kind of what we talked about, control, micromanagement, maybe even toxic communication. It seemed like there are usually some kind of positive need behind it. Like if there's less psychological safety, it's not because they want to psychologically punish someone. It's because they don't know better ways to induce responsibility. Like what I'm saying is it's not guide you to a solution to that. And if you want, Maria, you can reach out to me and we can discuss it more. But kind of what I'm trying to say is that going after the need, and if you have capacity to have a conversation with this particular person, like how hierarchical rules or psychological safety have the impact on what kind of their agenda, that can help them kind of change certain things, even though I'm not saying it's easy to do.
Yeah, I have experience with startups a little bit different. Yeah, definitely the pressure is high, and the push to produce, maybe generate ideas, innovations, and so is immense there. But I also have a feeling like they have this opportunity to set it right from the beginning. So it's more about bringing the knowledge that this is what is there, right? And also defining what psychological safety is. Is psychological safety that we are nice to each other, or is such a psychological safety that we like the goal of our communication and our feedback is to grow together, right? So this is very very like big distinction that I see, and I see that oftentimes in corporations that are huge, it's really hard to break um, the patterns of behavior, although there might be less pressure than in startups, but because they carry their own unconsciousness, the whole uh, corporation that's built on certain stories, certain untold stories that everybody is aware of but never name them, and certain rules of behavior that are not written, but they are allowed, let's say. And in this kind of field, it's so sometimes hard to break through this psychological unsafety, that I believe that startups, if they started right, they have a great potential to grow, like build a really healthy organization in front of them.
No, I think also having the models to follow, because like more and more what becomes kind of not obvious, but kind of what people know or heard about it is like self-organization, or like companies like Zappos, where they talk about happiness and where they talk about like they experimented with holacracy. It's kind of like what people who are founders bring in as values as well, because um, like usually of course the focus is on building something, building the product, and what gets missed is how we build it. Like, are we building it and it's hard, it's difficult, it's a grind? That's one approach. But like, are we building it so that we want it to be inspiring and we all want to have happy employees and so on? And like, having that focus doesn't mean that it will become easier to do it, but at least we can return from time to time to this value that we have and see how it is implemented or not implemented.
Keeping in mind the time, I probably will take us closer to the end and last question that I have for you, and because there are no more questions in the chat, so I'll put it.
There's one about mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Oh, how could I miss it? Or maybe it came to you directly.
So the question is, how can mindfulness practices and mental health resources be integrated into the culture of tech companies to support the overall well-being of their employees? It's another question I've had from. I would start my own company quite soon. Well, I think in a way it's a popular thing to talk about mindfulness. There are certain resources and research that potentially can be used as a rationale for introducing these type of activities and practices. But again, it depends on the culture of the company, whether they are interested in that. I think that even 1 minute mindfulness before, let's say, starting a meeting, just getting presence to the agenda that we have could be very helpful in terms of how do we run this meeting. And like even through the day, stopping, taking a few breaths, noticing what's happening with me, that's the basis of emotional intelligence as well. So I think it's integral. There might be very different ways to implement it, kind of company-wide or whatever, but also they could be introduced as different type of things, because mindfulness can be practiced in a different way. And well, that's kind of my thoughts.
Thank you. We have another question, and it's about company values. What does it mean? Values represent what is really important for us, for the company, and they are defined by rules, under which conditions I want to live them and under which conditions I need to avoid them. This is very complex and difficult to set, especially in high regulated businesses where you work.
I'm sorry, Olga. Daniela is speaking. It's not a question. It's just an answer to Maria, and what she asked actually about how to implement the
thank you,
rules
Daniela.
of authenticity, and because I know her company very well.
I see. Thank you for clarifying this. Okay, and yeah, values are setting a direction for sure, that we can put many things under it, as you said. So, taking us to the end, I'd like to maybe ask you, Sasha, to maybe give us tips, or to give tips to the first time managers in IT, how to start their path in a way that they don't create the snowball effect.
Tips. I hate tips. Because tips imply that I know what's right and what's not. So what I would say, these are not the tips, but more kind of directions where to look. One is have conversations with people. This is super banal, but at the same time, it could be, well, almost like a lifesaver. I mean, for example, if you have a conversation with your manager before taking the promotion and you said like, I'm new to this, I will definitely I will do some mistakes. What will happen then? So this simple and not a risky conversation, it can make a big change, because then you will find out how they can support you. You find out like what potential ramifications of the mistakes that you make could be. Because otherwise, what I noticed is that people create a lot of stories about and assumptions about, if I do this, this will happen, and so forth. So kind of clarifying your assumptions, and of course, first becoming aware about those assumptions, which is also not an easy process, but becoming aware of your assumptions and clarifying them, that can make huge difference.
And if I just may
Yeah,
add
sure.
observation here, that actually this is the first step to authenticity, where you are taking a little bit off your mask and you're like, hey, I'm here a little bit vulnerable, testing my boundaries, right?
Yeah, I mean, saying I'm afraid is super difficult, but sometimes there are ways you can do it indirectly. You can imply that if saying this directly is too risky or too vulnerable. So that's one thing, having these type of conversations. Another is asking more questions, and not just all kind of questions, but questions in terms of things that bother you. I noticed this, and I'm curious what's happening. And that's basically the first step that you can use then to deliver your interpretation, but also it opens up a conversation about stuff that you would like to change, and also talking about stuff that you want to change. Like, usually what I notice, people don't talk about stuff, the very stuff that they care about. What's quality? What's responsibility? Like having a conversation with someone who's your new report, like, what does it mean for you, this abstract term? I interpret it like this. I'm curious, what do you think? What does it mean for you to be responsible? What does it mean for you to deliver good quality?
Yeah.
But of course, asking them questions kind of to elicit what's important for them. Part of it you will notice from the behavior, but having the conversation, what's important for you? I noticed you did this. What was the reason for you to do this? So conversations, because without conversations, like there's no way to do it, or at least there's no way to do it in a fun way or in an easy way. I'm guessing that it's possible to do it in a super stressful way, just kind of grind, white knuckle through whatever is in front of you. But having conversation, building trust, building relationship, asking people, sharing your perspectives, that these are the kind of very, very abstract guidelines but without them it's not possible.
And maybe from my side, it's just create a routine that you want to test and stick to, that it's for you, because as Sasha says, tips are means that
Tips are bad.
you would know exactly what is right, but many things are right for one people but not right for the others. So test and try different routines that will help you sustain your work-life balance, maybe sustain good, healthy conversations, and take you to the expansion, not only professionally but also on the personal level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like one last remark.
Mm-hmm.
It's like why I think tips are bad is because they tend to make people look for the perfect tip rather than doing something imperfect. And it's much better to do imperfect with the right conditions rather than don't do anything and look for the perfect idea or for the right solution.
Mm-hmm. I very much agree with this, because it also, once we let go of tips, we remove the pressure that we need to be to fulfill them, to fulfill the expectation of this tip. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I like the deepness and the philosophy path that we took in it. I hope that listeners enjoyed it too. We will, of course, upload the recording, and we are sorry for the technical issue. We have no idea why LinkedIn didn't activate the go live button. So next time, if we do it again, we will make sure to be technically more appropriate. But thanks a lot, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks all. Enjoy your Fridays.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.